I was privileged to serve as the political advisor, personal lawyer, and draft speechwriter for the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Those of us who were close to him, we knew what an extraordinary person he was. But if you look back and look at it clinically and objectively, the overwhelming majority of the country, particularly the overwhelming majority of white people, they knew about this 35-year-old preacher, but they really didn't know that much about him. That all changed on August 28th. Because it's not as if on the night of August 27th or the morning of August 28th, he sat down and said, well, what am I going to say? Once the decision to hold the march occurred, he had given some thought to it, and those of us who were privileged to be his close advisors, we began to talk about not so much the exact language, but the direction. What were we going to say to this expected group of people who were going to come here to march on Washington? And on the night before, on August 27th, in the corner of the lobby of the Willard Hotel, we sat down and discussed sort of the last minute as to what he might say in his speech, and he was working on upstairs. And there were really two divergent points of view as to what he would say. There was a point of view of his very close friend and civil rights ally, the Reverend Ralph Abernathy. His view may be supported by others like Andy Young, but who was not there. But his view was, Martin, all these people coming tomorrow, meaning August 28th, are going to come here. They're coming here to hear you preach. They're traveling here, and you've got to preach in a way about the movement that's going to be uplifting, and you've got to so forth. And then there were other people, like Professor Lewis Reddick, who was a professor of political history at Morgan State University, and Cleveland Robinson, vice president of a labor union, District 65 Hotel Resort Workers Labor Union. Their position was, listen, a lot of people have heard you preach before, Martin. They're not traveling here just to hear you give another sermon. They're traveling because they want you to give them direction. Where do we go from here? Therefore, there was a back and forth discussion. There came a point when Dr. King had said earlier in the meeting we were having, Clarence, take some notes on this. And then he says, I think you should, Clarence, what you should do upstairs, if you don't mind, why don't you go upstairs for a moment and don't stop and have any martinis, because I need your mind to be clear, he said. He said, go upstairs and make a summary of these and come back. So I did that. But when I came back, I also brought with me a handwritten suggested text of what he should say in his speech. The suggested text was incorporating in a summary of what we had discussed over the previous 5 weeks. I actually wrote out an opening of a speech that he should consider using. Fast forward, it's the 28th. He's actually speaking. I'm standing behind him. I'm 50 feet away, okay? And as I'm listening to him, I'm tracking what he's saying. And as I'm tracking and listening to him, I'm saying to myself, he decided to use verbatim what I had suggested. Didn't change a sentence, a period, a comma, a paragraph, nothing. And then, as I listened, and I didn't know it at that time until I actually saw a copy of the speech, what he had done was that he had, after the first 7 paragraphs of the opening, which he used verbatim of what I had suggested, he then added his own paragraphs, which was very seamlessly transitioning from that which I had suggested. I'm listening to this, and as he is speaking, at some point as he's speaking his own, from that section of the speech, using his own paragraphs, his favorite gospel singer is on the podium, who had performed earlier. Miss Mahalia Jackson, who in August 1963 was one of the world's now renowned, perhaps the greatest gospel singer in the world at that time. She had actually performed earlier, singing "I've Been Buked and I've Been Scorned," one of his favorite gospel songs. But she shouts out to him, "Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream." I'm watching this. Now, if you see the film of him giving the speech, you don't hear that, and you may watch his head turn a little bit differently, but from the rear that I could see, once she said that, he took the prepared text that he was reading, as I described what that text was to you, and he moves it to the left side of the lectern, grabs the lectern, and I'm looking at him, and this is all happening in real time, and I turn to that unknown person, whoever that was, standing next to me, and I say, "These people don't know it, but they're about ready to go to church." And I said that because I saw his whole body language change from the rear. I saw where when he was reading, was standing, so forth and so forth. But when he started to speak spontaneously, his body language changed, and I said to myself, he's going to preach. So that's why I said they don't know about ready to go to church. From that point on, the balance of the speech that everybody celebrates so much was completely extemporaneous and spontaneous. And he didn't get to talking about the dream until near the middle end of the speech, near the end of the speech. It is as if on that day, some cosmic, transcendental force came down and took over Martin King's body. Same body, same voice, same everything, except not. Something, it was, I said I was watching as if I was watching lightning in a bottle, capturing lightning in a bottle, something I'd never seen then or had ever seen since. The specialness of the speech resulted from the confluence of the following factors I'm going to now indicate it. One, it occurred in the capital of the government of the United States, Washington, D.C. Two, it was at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial, the president who had emancipated the slaves. Three, it was, as of that date, the largest single gathering of human beings in one place at one time for any place ever. Later years, 65, 67, related to the Vietnam War, there were demonstrations in Washington and Central Park, 500 million people. But up until that time, there'd never been any group of people assembled between 250,000 people who came together for one place. Four, 25% of the people who assembled were white. Okay? 5, the combination, the texture of the people assembled, not just the youth, not just the 25% of the white people, but the March on Washington consisted of a coalition of labor unions. You had Father Eugene Dalberg, Chancellor of the University of Notre Dame. You had Archbishop O'Boyle, the Archbishop, Catholic Archbishop in the diocese in Washington, D.C. You had Rabbi Joachim Prinz, the president of the American Jewish Congress. And something that historians and few people who look back on the march ever talk about. But I am convinced that it had, what I'm going to tell you, had a profound effect on Martin Luther King Jr. I think it affected how he spoke. And that was the speaker who immediately preceded him before he was introduced was Rabbi Joachim Prinz of the American Jewish Congress. And among the things that he said in his speech, and I'm paraphrasing now, he says, when I was a rabbi in Germany under the Hitler regime, I remember many bad things. I remember bigotry and hatred. But those were not the worst things that I remember. The thing that I remember that was far worse than bigotry and hatred was the silence of the good people. I was watching Dr. King from the rear and see that he was taking notes. I don't know whether he was taking notes about what he was going to say, but knowing the Martin King that I know, that when Rabbi Prince said that, and not many books are written about what I'm also going to say to you, the success of the American civil rights movement under the leadership of Dr. King was inextricably tied to and a result of the active participation of the American Jewish community. I can say without fear of contradiction, the American civil rights movement would not have been successful without the 24/7 participation of the American Jewish community.
Randolph, I would simply like to say that I think this has been one of the great days of America. And I think this march will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, demonstrations for freedom and human dignity ever held in the United States.
The I Have a Dream speech was transnational. It was universal. And it was a communication of content that was spoken in a universal language. It didn't depend upon whether you spoke Polish, Czech, Russian, or French. It had a universal appeal. And that's what we are seeing now, 50 years after. From 1956 until April 4th, 1968, the date of his assassination, with the exception of Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation, Martin Luther King Jr. may have done more to achieve political, social, racial equality in America than any other single person or event in the previous 400 years of the history of the United States. And if you can't remember what I've just said to you, then I say, remember this metaphor. If you were fortunate enough to be alive during that 12-year and 4-month period, and you went outside at night and looked up at the sky, and you saw a shooting star across the midnight sky, brighter and more incandescent than any other star that had ever been seen in the heavens. That was Martin Luther King Jr.